Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe, like and share. Thank you. The rain always fell heavier in Lekki on days like this. Not that Zara Larsson believed in signs or omens. She believed in delivery schedules, fabric swatches, and spreadsheets that never lied. But as her black SUV wound through the narrow estate road toward the mansion on Bluewater Hill, even she had to admit, it felt like something was coming. She adjusted the collar of her linen blazer, smoothing out an invisible wrinkle. On the passenger seat beside her, her tablet blinked, meeting, David Cole, 10:30 a.m. Below it, a folder of architectural drawings sat neatly beside her measuring tape and a swatch booklet in rose gold. Everything about her was composed. Perfect. On the outside. The SUV pulled up to the gates. Cole Residence, the plaque read. Subtle. Expensive. Unapologetic. Zara rolled down the window just as a young security guard approached. Good morning, Ma. Please your name. Zara Larsson. Larsson Interiors. I have a 10:30 appointment with Mr. David Cole. He peered at a clipboard and nodded quickly. Yes, Ma. You are expected. The iron gates slid open with a mechanical sigh. Her driver eased forward, revealing the full scale of what lay behind. Zara had seen luxury. She'd worked on penthouses in Banana Island, even consulted for a Saudi family's estate in Abuja. But this? This was architectural seduction. A modern blend of concrete and glass, kissed with vertical gardens and gold-rimmed windows. The house curved, flowed, not a mansion, but a fortress with a heartbeat. Trees swayed softly in the wind like they had been planted to whisper secrets. Her driver parked. She stepped out, heels clicking against the marble driveway, umbrella held above her sleek braid. A man in a navy uniform greeted her at the door and gestured her in. Inside, the world was quieter. Warmer. Muted lighting. A scent of eucalyptus and sandalwood. The soft trickle of indoor water features. She almost forgot why she was here. And then, he entered. David Cole was not what she expected. He wasn't some stiff tycoon hiding behind thick glasses and thicker bank accounts. No. He was barefoot. Barefoot and unapologetically confident as he descended the floating staircase in a black linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a sliver of ink on his collarbone. Tall. Fair-skinned. Sharp jawline. Muscular in a quiet, deliberate way. Why is he barefoot? Was the only coherent thought she had. Ms. Larsson, he said, voice low and smooth like aged whiskey. Right on time. Of course, she replied, recovering quickly. I don't believe in being late. He nodded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Neither do I. She followed him into the central atrium, where the ceiling opened to the sky via motorized glass panels, letting in the sound of distant thunder and filtered sunlight. You've seen the layout, he asked, gesturing toward a scale model on the table between them. I've memorized it, she replied. 6 guest suites. 1 master spa wing. Rooftop garden. You're turning this into a boutique wellness hotel. He studied her, lips curving faintly. I like people who come prepared. Zara ignored the flutter in her chest. I like clients who give me freedom. Within budget, he said. Within vision, she corrected. A pause. They both smiled. The tour began. Zara's heels moved confidently over wood and stone. She spoke about natural textures, layering ambient light, the psychology of neutral tones. David listened with quiet intensity, occasionally adding comments that revealed a deeper knowledge than she'd expected. She liked that. A man who understood mood boards and water pressure valves. A man who didn't pretend. When they reached the spa bathroom, floor-to-ceiling marble, soaking tub the size of a hot tub, she paused. This is your personal wing, she asked, already sketching lighting in her mind. David leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, revealing the edge of a tattoo just beneath his sleeve. It is. I want something, calming. But not sterile. Intimate, but not soft. Zara turned to face him. You want contradiction. I want beauty that earns its silence. Their eyes locked. The word sat between them like a challenge neither was willing to explain. Later, when she was back in her SUV reviewing notes, Zara replayed that sentence in her mind, beauty that earns its silence. He was not like other clients. And she was not going to let herself be distracted by aesthetics wrapped in a 6-foot frame and mystery. But when her tablet buzzed with a new message from an unknown number that night, her breath caught before she even read it. Thank you for today. I think we'll make something beautiful together. David. She stared at the message for a long time. Then, against her better judgment, she smiled. Zara woke to sunlight threading through linen curtains and the faint sound of jazz. Not a playlist. Not synthetic ambient music. Real jazz, notes that wandered and came back, bold and unsure at once. She blinked into the soft gold of the guest suite and sat up slowly, registering the scent of bergamot tea on the tray left beside her bed. There was also a note. When you're ready. D. Just that. No time. No instructions. Zara ran a hand over her hair, still slightly tangled from sleep, and let herself exhale into the quiet of the morning. It had been a long time since someone had made space for her without asking anything in return. She didn't know if that was generosity, or a test. By the time she found David, he was shirtless and barefoot again. On the rooftop terrace. Stretching. And not in some casual, absent-minded way. He was fully immersed, arms up, muscles taut, body coiled like someone who used to fight and still knew how. She paused in the doorway, silent. The sun painted shadows across his tattooed back, and for a second, all she could hear was breath and wind and the occasional ping of a wind chime swinging over the herb garden. The same herbs she'd seen listed in his spa treatment menu. She took a deliberate step forward. David turned, unbothered by her presence. Morning. Very morning, she replied, averting her eyes with a smirk. Don't you believe in shirts? He grinned. Only when absolutely necessary. She gestured toward his torso. That's a lot of ink for a hotel owner. Each mark is a receipt, he said simply. You. I collect silence. He raised an eyebrow. Spaces, I mean, Zara clarified. On walls. In floor plans. Silence has design, too. David tilted his head. So we're both in the business of restoration. Zara didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, they weren't talking about architecture anymore. Later that afternoon, they walked the unfinished master spa suite together. The space echoed with potential. Zara pointed out where the heated marble bench would go, outlined the chromotherapy lights above the tub, described how scent would circulate in the hammam area. David nodded. It's better. Warmer. I told you to trust me, she said, making notes on her tablet. I never said I didn't. She looked at him. People think silence means disinterest, David said, eyes on the light fixtures. But sometimes, silence means attention. Zara felt her throat tighten. Because she wasn't used to men like him. Not quiet in the way of weakness, but quiet in the way of fire held just beneath the skin. She cleared her throat. Tomorrow I want to start testing fabrics for the massage tables and lounge upholstery. You'll need to be here. David didn't smile this time. I'm always here. And he was. Even when he wasn't looking directly at her, she felt his presence. It unnerved her. Excited her. Exposed her. The tension broke that evening. In the most unexpected place. Zara had wandered into the kitchen, barefoot, robe tied lazily around her waist, looking for ginger tea. She wasn't expecting to find David bent over a saucepan, shirt on for once, sleeves rolled back. "You cook?" she asked, arms crossed. He glanced at her over his shoulder. "I feed people. It's different." She moved closer, peering into the pot. "What's that?" "Lemon chicken in saffron broth." "Show off." He smiled. "Hungry?" "No," she said. "But if you ask again in 5 minutes, I might be." David pulled 2 plates down from a glass shelf without another word. They ate in silence at the long kitchen island, the air between them softening with each bite. No questions. No expectations. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "You always this difficult to read?" David looked at her. Really looked. "No," he said. "Just with people who matter." That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She lay under linen sheets in the guest room, staring at the dim light blinking on her tablet. Her presentation files were untouched. Her checklist unfinished. All she could think about was the way David had looked at her when he said matter. As if he wasn't talking about now, but later. As if he was inviting her into something deeper, without speaking it aloud. She hated that she was tempted. Hated that her fingers hovered over the screen when another message pinged into view. "If you're awake, the spa tub is ready. Thought you might want to test it before the tile work gets covered tomorrow." Zara stared. Then, like a woman who had stopped pretending she wasn't curious, she wrapped her robe tighter and left the room. The spa suite was lit by a soft amber glow. The tub was full, steam curling above the surface, water rippling in quiet invitation. David wasn't there. But his presence was. In the folded towel. In the glass of infused water waiting beside the ledge. In the exact temperature of the room, warm, but not heavy. Zara slid into the tub slowly, foam rising around her shoulders. She let herself float. Not in the water, but in the moment. No titles. No projects. No measured perfection. Just breath. And heat. And something opening inside her she didn't yet recognize. When she returned to her suite nearly an hour later, her hair damp, her skin flushed, a new message blinked on her screen. Did it feel like an exhale? Zara stared at the text. Then, slowly, she typed back. "Yes. But now I'm holding my breath again." The morning after the bath, Zara couldn't focus. Her mind felt like fabric that had been soaked, wrung, then smoothed out and folded the wrong way. Everything was still in place, but nothing sat quite right. She stared at her tablet screen without seeing it. Her design files were open, her notes updated, and the color palette for the relaxation rooms was still perfect. But her hands hovered over the screen like they weren't hers. All she could think about was that last message. Did it feel like an exhale? Yes. But now I'm holding my breath again. David hadn't said anything else that night. Hadn't responded. But he didn't need to. The air around them was heavier now. Charged. Like a circuit had finally closed. They passed each other the next morning during a contractor walkthrough. Polite nods. Professional voices. Not a single mention of foamed water or candlelight. But her skin buzzed every time his shadow passed hers. Zara hated it. Loved it. Feared it. Because she knew herself. And she knew what happened when she let someone in. That evening, a storm rolled in. Not a gentle rain, but a full tropical downpour. Sheets of water smacked the floor-to-ceiling windows, thunder rumbled like it was coming from inside the house, and the lights flickered just enough to unsettle her. Zara stood in the central hallway staring out into the darkness, tea growing cold in her hands. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. David appeared quietly at the far end of the corridor, barefoot again, wearing a black long-sleeve shirt and soft gray lounge pants. His hair was damp, like he'd been outside. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. They stood in silence, the kind that only two people aching with restraint could share. Finally, David spoke. "You should be in bed." Zara turned to face him, her voice steady. "So should you." He walked closer, each step deliberate but unthreatening. "I couldn't sleep." "Me neither." Another long pause. He reached out, gently took the tea from her hands, and set it on the side table. Then he looked at her. Not with heat. Not with possession. But with something more dangerous. Honesty. "I'm trying to give you space," he said softly. Zara's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because once we cross it, I won't want to give it back." The moment shattered everything. The silence. The professionalism. The logic. Zara didn't answer. Instead, she took a single step forward, and there was no hesitance, no slow burn. It was immediate. It was messy. It was everything she had tried to resist. The man who had been waiting for permission. One hand unleashing. They didn't make it to the guest or any of the places that would have made sense. No. They found each other between breath and lightning and the sound of their own quiet surroundings. Afterward, they lay wrapped in one of outside the guest wing. Neither of them spoke for a while. The storm had softened into drizzle, the air smelled of wet earth and eucalyptus. Zara rested her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart. Not too fast. Not too slow. Steady. "I don't do this," she said finally, voice small. "I know," David whispered. "I'm not good at letting people stay." David pulled her closer. "Then don't think of this as staying. What should I call it?" "Breathing." Zara laughed quietly. "You and your metaphors. You like them." She smiled against his chest. "I do." They didn't speak again for a long time. But they didn't need to. Because in the silence, in the soft exhale of a storm that had finally passed, they both knew. They had crossed something they wouldn't come back from. Zara couldn't pinpoint the exact moment things shifted, only that they had. 2 weeks had passed since the night she and David crossed the line. Since the storm, the hallway, the kiss. Since the robe slipped from her shoulders and her heart followed. They didn't speak about it afterward. Not directly. Not out loud. But everything had changed. David had become softer in some ways, more deliberate in others. He brewed her tea in the mornings. Kept a hand gently on the small of her back when they passed in narrow halls. He didn't rush anything. He let her come to him. And she did. But only halfway. Because inside her, something was off. It started with the coffee. She couldn't stomach the smell anymore. The scent hit her in the guest suite one morning like a slap, thick and nauseating. She'd always been a 2-shot espresso woman. Suddenly, she couldn't look at it. Then came the fatigue. No matter how much she slept, it wasn't enough. Her limbs ached with softness. Her thoughts slowed. She chalked it up to stress. To the weight of design meetings and midnight emotions. To the way David looked at her sometimes, like she was something rare and fleeting. But deep down, she knew. Something was changing. The day it finally hit her, she was with Grace. They were reviewing the finished samples for the massage tables in the spa suite. Zara bent forward to pick up a roll of fabric, and nearly toppled sideways. Grace caught her arm. "Whoa. You good?" Zara straightened quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Yeah. Just stood too fast." Grace narrowed her eyes. You've been pale all week. And you flinched at the paint fumes yesterday. Zara laughed it off, but it sounded weak even to her. You know how clients are. High stakes. Low sleep. Grace didn't push. She simply said, maybe take a breath. You're not a robot, Zara. Zara nodded. Smiled. But inside, panic bloomed quietly in her chest. That night, she lay in bed wide awake, hands crossed over her stomach. It was flat. Still. Familiar. But her body felt full. Like something else was alive inside her. The thought hit her like a whisper first. Then a wave. She sat up. Walked to the bathroom. Stared at herself in the mirror. And said it for the first time. What if I'm pregnant? The next day, she bought a test. She didn't tell David. Didn't tell Grace. Didn't even tell herself what she hoped for. She took it in the early hours of the morning, standing barefoot on the cold marble of the guest suite bathroom, wrapped in nothing but a robe and silence. She didn't watch the lines appear. She didn't have to. The result was clear. Positive. Zara sat on the edge of the bathtub, breathing slowly. And for the first time in years, she cried. Not out of fear. Not even shock. But something deeper. A feeling she couldn't name yet. David noticed something was different. He found her in the herb garden that evening, sitting on one of the low stone benches, running her fingers through a patch of lavender. Hey, he said softly. Zara looked up. Her eyes were tired. Her smile was small. Long day. She nodded. Long. Everything. He sat beside her without a word. Waited. And for a moment, she wanted to tell him. But the words stuck. Because once she spoke them, the air would change. And she wasn't ready for the silence that might follow. So instead, she said. Do you ever feel like something is about to change, and you don't know if it's a blessing or a warning? David looked at her for a long time. Then he said, sometimes they're the same thing. They sat there as the sky darkened, his hand eventually finding hers. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And even though she hadn't told him yet, even though the world inside her had tilted without warning, Zara felt, for the first time, that she wasn't alone in it. Zara didn't know when the silence started to feel like a lie. At first, it was protection. For her. For David. For the fragile thing growing inside her that didn't yet feel real. But now, every moment they shared, every touch, every kiss, every night she fell asleep with his hand resting on her hip, felt weighted with something he didn't know. And it was starting to show. David hadn't asked yet, but his eyes did. Constantly. When she pushed her breakfast away, when she took deeper breaths during long meetings, when she blinked a second too long before standing up, he noticed. And he said nothing. Which made it worse. She stood in front of the mirror that morning, hand resting over her stomach. Still flat. Still unchanged. But she felt it now. The deep, biological certainty that her body wasn't just hers anymore. Something was shifting, slowly but undeniably. A knock on her suite door pulled her from her thoughts. Zara? David's voice was soft. We're heading to the rooftop in 10. She quickly adjusted her shirt, brushing her hand through her hair. Coming. The meeting was a blur. The design team had gathered on the rooftop to review the green roof installation, an elaborate system of planters, irrigation, and a yoga deck David insisted would pull breath into the building. Zara usually led these walkthroughs with sharp detail and quiet authority. Today, she was distracted. The sun was too bright. Her blouse too tight. Her balance off. Grace handed her a water bottle with a quick glance. You okay? Zara nodded but didn't answer. David watched her closely. When the meeting ended and the contractors descended the staircase, David stayed behind. She felt him before he spoke. You haven't been yourself lately. Zara turned toward the view, Lego stretching in warm haze beyond the terrace. I've just been tired, she said, voice low. He took a step closer. Is it the project? Me? She didn't answer. Because it wasn't just the project. And it wasn't just him. It was everything. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. She walked barefoot to the kitchen, hoping a chamomile tea might settle her nerves. David was already there. He stood by the open fridge, shirtless, a glass of water in his hand. He turned as she entered, and for the first time in days, neither of them pretended. You're avoiding me, he said simply. Zara froze. He set the glass down. Talk to me. She leaned against the counter, her arms folded across her stomach protectively. I'm not avoiding you, she whispered. I'm trying to figure out how to say something I don't know how to say. David's voice softened. Then say it badly. Say it scared. Just say it. She looked up at him, at the man who had given her space when she needed it, heat when she craved it, and stillness when she didn't know how to ask. And finally, she let the silence go. I'm pregnant. The word hovered in the air between them. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. David didn't move. Didn't flinch. He looked at her the way he had looked at the rooftop garden. With quiet awe. And then, he stepped forward. Gently, so gently, he placed a hand over hers where it rested on her abdomen. Are you okay? He asked first. Zara nodded. Her eyes welled. I don't know what I am. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there, heart pounding under his skin. Then finally, you don't have to know. We'll figure it out. Together. Zara's lips trembled. You're not angry? David shook his head slowly. I've never been more terrified in my life. She laughed softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. Same. He pulled her into his arms, one hand on her back, the other still resting between them. You're not alone, he whispered. And for the first time since the test, since the quiet panic, since the nausea and the questions, Zara believed him. Not because he said the right thing. But because he stayed. The days after the confession were softer. Zara expected distance. Or overcompensation. Some wild swing between fear and overplanning. But what David gave her instead was consistency. He didn't try to fix her. He didn't demand answers. He just showed up. Over and over again. On the morning after she told him, she found a handwritten note beside a folded blanket in the lounge. You can still design the life you want. Nothing's off the table now. Just tell me where you want the lines drawn. D. It wasn't dramatic. But it made her cry. Because that was what she feared losing, control. Autonomy. The structure she had built for herself brick by emotional brick. But instead of collapsing it, he was offering her tools. They started walking together in the evenings. Sometimes around the rooftop garden. Sometimes down to the courtyard when the night air was cool enough. They didn't talk about the baby, not yet. But they talked about everything else. I used to think kids weren't for me, David said one night, the two of them sitting on the low edge of the spa pool, legs dangling in the water. Too much risk. Too much of myself I'd have to give up. Zara nodded, pulling her robe tighter. I didn't think I'd ever be ready. He looked over at her, eyes reflecting the low light. Are you? She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said quietly, I don't know if anyone ever really is. But I know I want to try. David reached over and took her hand. Then we'll try, he said. And just like that, something inside her settled. That week, David made a change. He cleared out the empty guest room next to hers and turned it into a soft space, his words, not hers. No crib yet. No bottles. Nothing overwhelming. Just light. Neutral paint. A soft chair near the window. A space with room to grow. He didn't tell her he was doing it. She found it by accident and stood in the doorway for a long time, one hand over her belly. When David saw her there later, she didn't have to say anything. He just walked in behind her and said, "You don't have to decide anything today. I just thought, maybe we'd start here." Zara turned to him. "Why are you like this?" she asked, eyes wet. David chuckled softly. "Because when I'm not building things, I break them. And I'd rather build with you." That night, not with heat, but with gratitude. With trust. With the kind of care that comes only when two people stop performing and just exist in the same space. When he laid her down, it wasn't about fire or urgency. It was about slowness. About watching her breathe. About touching her like she was already becoming someone new. And when she whispered, "Don't let go," he held her tighter. Because he didn't plan to. The next morning, Zara sat in the unfinished nursery alone. Sunlight poured through the window. She'd left her tablet in a chair beside her, the screen still lit with notes on spa tile finishes and scent diffusers. She stared down at her hands, soft, warm, steady. She was becoming. Not losing herself. Not falling apart. Becoming someone new. And for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt hope. Zara woke before the sun. She wasn't sure why. The baby wasn't showing yet. Her body was changing, yes, her chest was tender, her sleep lighter, her emotions a little louder, but nothing alarming. Still, something in the air felt different. She padded barefoot into the nursery. The window was open slightly. A breeze rolled through the half-finished space, stirring the curtains. She ran her fingers along the edge of the crib they hadn't built yet. And for the first time in days, she felt watched. Later that morning, Grace showed up early. Unusual. She always gave Zara space on Sundays. Grace didn't knock. She walked straight into the kitchen with her phone in her hand and a look Zara hadn't seen before. "Have you seen this?" she asked, voice clipped. Zara shook her head. "What?" Grace set the phone on the table. It was a blog post. An exposé. About David. Photos from years ago. A court case that had been dismissed. Whispers about financial deals in Europe that never made it to public record. "He was young," Grace said softly. "But this is a lot." Zara stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. The article painted him as ruthless. Brilliant, yes. But guarded. Closed off. Dangerous in business and distant in love. It didn't sound like the man she knew. But it sounded like a man she hadn't asked about. David was in the courtyard when she found him. Watering the citrus trees. Calm. Unbothered. He looked up, smiling at her like he hadn't just been dragged across the internet. "You saw it?" he asked, already knowing. Zara nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" His smile faded. He turned off the hose. "I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't sure when it mattered enough to bring it up." Zara folded her arms. "You think it doesn't matter? I think you matter. And I didn't want my past to color your choice to stay." She stared at him. "And then, quietly, but if I'm building a life with you, I deserve to know what I'm building it on." That night, he told her everything. They sat in the guest lounge, just like the first week she moved in, only now they weren't strangers. He didn't dodge or filter. He told her about the startup that collapsed. The friend who betrayed him. The lawsuit that was thrown out but not forgotten. The time he nearly gave up and disappeared. And then he told her why he came back to Nigeria. I wanted to build something real. Something permanent. But I was afraid I'd mess it up. Zara listened, silent, heart aching in her chest. I've only ever been one of two things, David said. Feared. Or forgotten. She reached for his hand. Then maybe it's time you let yourself be loved. The next morning, she posted a photo. Nothing dramatic. Just the spa garden. A caption that read, "He builds things that make people feel safe. That's the only truth that matters to me." It didn't tag him. Didn't name names. But people noticed. And it made a different kind of noise. Later, in the nursery, David leaned against the doorway and watched her unpack a small basket of books. You didn't have to do that, he said. Zara glanced up. I didn't do it for you. He smiled. I know. She crossed the room, stood in front of him, placed his hand gently over her stomach. I just needed you to know. I still trust you. He leaned his forehead against hers. Even with the mess. Especially with the mess. And in that sunlit, unfinished room, their love became something stronger than pretty. It became real. Zara could feel the change long before she saw it. It wasn't the physical shift. Though, yes, her clothes were fitting differently, and the slight bump was now undeniable, but the way her body had started to feel alive. Not just from the baby, but from everything. The weight of what was happening to her body and to her future. She felt it in her pulse. In her breath. The way she moved through the house. Everything was different now. And David was changing too. They were at a gathering for the opening of a new luxury wellness center in Lagos. Zara had only agreed to go because she knew David would want to network, and he insisted on her presence as the face of the design. She had carefully chosen her outfit, a soft silk dress in deep blue that flowed over her stomach, a color she knew made her look effortlessly graceful. But the moment she stepped into the room, the air shifted. It wasn't just the glances. It was the whispers. The way the room seemed to tilt, if only slightly. And Zara, ever observant, felt it, the moment they knew. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, but she didn't let it show on her face. David had stepped forward, shaking hands with a business associate, but his attention was immediately drawn to Zara's movement. He turned, watching her. And when she caught his gaze, there was a flash of understanding between them. This was real. The pregnancy was no longer a secret. The evening passed with too many polite smiles and shallow conversations. Zara had long since retreated into herself. The pressure of being watched, being seen, now that her body had begun to change, felt too overwhelming. Her mind raced, not just with the weight of her public life but with the uncertainty of what came next. What would people say? How would they judge? And when she caught sight of the journalist from the exposé earlier in the evening, her stomach churned. David noticed her unease and immediately excused himself from his conversation. You okay? He asked softly, his voice a low murmur against the hum of the room. Zara nodded quickly, not trusting herself to speak without betraying the anxiety roiling inside her. I'm fine, she managed. But her hand trembled ever so slightly as she reached out to steady herself on the edge of a nearby table. David studied her for a beat, his expression unreadable, before he placed a firm hand on the small of her back. Let's go. You don't need to be here. When they returned to the mansion, the weight of the night still hung between them. David didn't try to push for conversation immediately. He simply handed her a glass of water and sat beside her on the couch. Zara took a sip, feeling the tension in her body. I didn't think it would be like this. David's eyes softened, but his jaw was tight. Neither did I. You knew, though, right? Zara's voice cracked slightly. You knew that the moment I started showing, everything would change. David nodded slowly. I didn't think it would be so fast. She leaned back, exhaling deeply. I'm scared, David. Of everything. David's hand moved to hers, holding it gently. We're both scared. Zara shook her head, a dry laugh escaping her. This is different. I'm not just scared for me anymore. I'm scared for the baby. For us. For the life we're about to build. David's voice was low and steady as he spoke. We'll figure it out. Together. He paused for a moment before adding, I'm here. All of me. No matter what. The next day, they found themselves in the nursery, both quiet in their own way. Zara was at the window, gazing out into the garden while David carefully placed the final details into the room, a soft, neutral rug, a plush rocking chair, and shelves with baby books ready to be filled. She turned to him, the walls between them beginning to crack. I don't know how to do this, David, she whispered, voice shaky. I've spent my whole life avoiding this kind of change. David placed the last book on the shelf and moved toward her, standing behind her with a protective presence. You don't have to do it alone. We're not perfect, but we'll figure it out, one day at a time. Her heart trembled at the sincerity in his voice. She wanted to believe him. Needed to. Zara turned to face him, finally letting the emotions overwhelm her. I don't want to mess this up, she said, her voice breaking. I've spent my whole life making plans, controlling everything. And now, I'm out of control. David reached for her, his fingers brushing away the tear that had fallen. Let go of control, Zara. This is a new beginning. Not a battle. For the first time since the discovery, Zara allowed herself to trust in him, in them. And for the first time in a long while, she felt the first hint of peace. Zara hadn't expected the whispers to feel like this. She'd prepared herself for judgment, for scrutiny. But she hadn't known how much it would hurt, how much it would sting to feel like she was living under a microscope. The blog posts had barely slowed, and now the tabloids were jumping in with their own theories about her pregnancy, her relationship with David, and the future of both. It was exhausting. And even though David had been solid, unshakable, supportive in every way, Zara felt the weight of it alone. It was a rainy Thursday when it all hit. Zara had been meeting with her team about the final touches on the Wellness Center project. The tension in her shoulders was growing, the pressure of the media buzz always lingering in the back of her mind. Then, her phone buzzed. A message from Grace. Zara, I know it's been crazy, but you need to see this. The link was to a post. A photo. Her stomach twisted. The headline read, Is David Cole's pregnant girlfriend hiding more than just a baby? Zara clicked on it, her breath catching. The article claimed that Zara's pregnancy was part of some calculated plan to gain media attention, accusing her of using David for his wealth. The comments underneath were venomous, full of speculation and hate. Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. David's voice cut through her panic, Zara. He had entered the room, noticing her distress. His eyes immediately shifted to the phone in her hand. What is it? Zara didn't have the strength to explain. She handed him the phone wordlessly, watching his face harden as he read. When he was done, he looked at her, his jaw clenched. Don't let this get to you, he said, his voice low but steady. This is just noise. You don't need to respond to any of it. Zara closed her eyes. I didn't ask for any of this, David. I didn't ask for the judgment. David crossed the room, crouching down beside her. I know. And I hate that it's happening to you. To us. But we're stronger than they think. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. It's not about strength, David. It's about feeling everything, every single word they say about me. David gently took her hand, pulling her into his arms. And you don't have to face it alone. We'll face it together. She breathed in the familiar scent of him, the safety in his touch. But even in his embrace, she felt the weight of everything she couldn't control. That night, as they sat together in the living room, something shifted between them. Zara was quieter than usual, her gaze distant. David sensed it immediately. He didn't ask questions, but he knew she was carrying more than she was saying. After a few moments, he finally broke the silence. Zara, I need you to trust me with this. The world may be asking questions, but we don't need to have all the answers right now. She looked at him, her eyes tired but searching for comfort. I'm scared, David. He leaned closer. I know. And I'm scared too. But I can't do this without you. She let the words sink in. The vulnerability, the honesty. It was something new, something they hadn't spoken about. I don't want to lose what we're building, she whispered. You won't. I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you. The next morning, David made a decision. He called a press conference. Not to defend Zara. Not to justify anything. But to be honest. Standing in front of the media, he spoke calmly and clearly, his voice unwavering. The woman I love is pregnant with my child. And she deserves respect. We didn't plan for this level of scrutiny, but I won't allow anyone to tear us apart. This is not a publicity stunt. This is my family, and I will protect them. Zara watched from behind the scenes, her heart in her throat. This wasn't just a declaration for the world, it was for them. For their future. Later that evening, Zara stood in the nursery, her hand resting over her belly. David stood next to her, his presence solid beside her. The room felt warmer now, filled with their shared hope. The pressure from the outside world was still there, but Zara was beginning to feel like she didn't have to carry it alone. I'm scared too, David said, his voice soft, vulnerable. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. Zara smiled, a small but genuine smile. And I'm not leaving you either. They stood in silence for a moment, their fingers entwined, as the room filled with the soft glow of the evening light. This was their new reality. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real. And they would face it together. The reality of being watched didn't get easier. Zara had learned how to navigate the whispers and the intrusive questions, but it didn't make them any less painful. The tabloids still had their say. The public still had their opinions. But the biggest challenge was still the one she faced in the privacy of their home. Every time she walked into the nursery, every time her fingers brushed over the baby's clothes they hadn't yet unpacked, she felt the pressure of what was to come. Would she be ready? Would they both be ready? David knew something was wrong. It had been a quiet morning, just like every other. The weather was warm, the sun slanted through their kitchen windows, and Zara was there, her tablet open with design notes for their latest project. But he could feel the distance between them. She hadn't spoken much all day. Her smile was there, but it was forced, like she was playing a role in a life she hadn't fully accepted yet. Zara, David said softly, setting down his coffee. Talk to me. Zara looked up, meeting his eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, shaking her head. I'm fine, she said, but the words didn't sound right. They didn't feel true. David reached for her hand. No, you're not. And I'm not going to pretend I don't know it. She sighed, feeling the weight of it all. She was tired of pretending. It's just. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, she admitted, her voice quieter now. The pregnancy, the attention. I don't know if I'm ready to be who everyone expects me to be. David took her hand, pulling her gently toward him. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. And as far as the rest goes, we face it together. Later that day, David did something unexpected. He didn't just comfort her. He gave her space. He took a step back, let her breathe, and gave her time to process everything on her own terms. But he also did something that surprised her. He invited her mother to stay with them for a while. Zara's mother, Grace, had been a calming presence in her life for as long as she could remember, and even though she hadn't fully accepted Zara's relationship with David, she understood the importance of family. Zara didn't protest. In fact, the idea of having her mother around made her feel safe, like there was someone who could take some of the pressure off her shoulders. The next few weeks were a blend of growing connection and tension. Grace moved into their guest room, and while her presence was a comfort, it also brought up old wounds. Conversations between Zara and her mother were often laden with unspoken tension. Grace wasn't fond of the idea of her daughter raising a child with someone she barely knew. Her skepticism about David's intentions didn't make Zara's life any easier. One evening, as Zara was preparing dinner, her mother pulled her aside. "You know, darling, I'm just worried," Grace said, her voice lower now that David wasn't in earshot. "I don't think you fully understand the risks you're taking. You're not just bringing a child into this world. You're bringing a whole lot of baggage with it." Zara bristled at her words. "I know what I'm doing, Mom. And I'm not the same person I was when I first met David." Grace's gaze softened. "I just want you to be careful. Don't let your heart make decisions for your head." That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her mind racing through everything she'd heard that day, the concerns her mother had raised, the doubts that had been creeping into her own heart, and the love she had for David. For their future. For the child she was carrying. David was asleep beside her, his breathing steady, but she couldn't find peace. She had always prided herself on being independent, on making decisions for herself, and yet here she was, facing the unknown, afraid of losing the control she'd worked so hard to build. David woke to find her staring out the window, the soft glow of the moon casting shadows across her face. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Zara, what's wrong?" "I'm scared, David. I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can handle the pressure." David moved closer, wrapping his arms around her. "You don't have to do it alone. We don't have to face it alone." Zara's chest tightened, and she leaned into him, allowing herself to cry for the first time in weeks. "I love you," David whispered into her hair. "And we'll get through this, together." The next morning, Zara made a decision. She would let go. Let go of the fear, of the pressure. She wouldn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure, she wanted this. She wanted their future together, whatever it might look like. As she looked at David across the breakfast table, she smiled for the first time in a long while. It was small, but it was real. And for the first time, she felt the weight of the world begin to lift. Zara's body had changed. It wasn't just the growing bump, the way her skin seemed to glow more each day, or the small signs of life she could feel inside her. It was the way she felt inside, more connected to herself, to David, to everything she had once feared. It had been a few months since the pressure from the outside world had reached its peak. The media had finally moved on, and Zara had made peace with being the center of attention for reasons that didn't belong to her. She had learned to embrace the quiet moments, the soft mornings in bed with David, and the quiet hope that had settled in her heart. The house was filled with the sound of laughter now. David had made a habit of cooking breakfast on Sundays, and Zara had stopped pretending she didn't love it. They had built their life with the quiet kind of love that was not often seen in the world they had once lived in. But still, there was a constant reminder of the new beginning they had created, a baby, coming soon. And Zara wasn't sure if she was ready, but she no longer feared the unknown. One afternoon, Zara stood in the nursery, looking out the window at the garden, when David walked in. He had been quieter lately, and Zara had sensed it. There were moments when the weight of their future together felt like it was on his shoulders more than hers. But as she turned to him now, her heart filled with warmth. David's eyes softened as he watched her, his lips curving into a smile. I'm starting to think this room's going to be more of a playroom than a nursery. Zara chuckled, brushing a hand over the fabric of the crib she'd spent weeks choosing. You might be right. David stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her. I'm glad we're here, Zara. I'm glad we're doing this together. Her fingers traced the edges of his shirt, and she leaned into him. I never thought I could feel this way. So, calm, I guess. Calm. David raised an eyebrow. That's a new one. Zara laughed softly, her hand resting over her stomach. Well, I don't think I'd be able to do this without you. David kissed the top of her head, holding her tight. You never had to do it alone. The day finally arrived. The day that had felt so far away for so long. The baby was coming, and Zara felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. It was a long, tiring day of contractions and waiting, but when it finally happened, when she held their baby in her arms, everything changed again. David was by her side, just as he had promised. His hand gripped hers, his eyes filled with emotion as he watched her bring their child into the world. When their baby cried for the first time, the sound felt like the world finally settling. And for the first time, Zara felt complete. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm. They named their daughter Amina, a name that meant trustworthy, a reflection of the bond they had built and the trust they had given each other. Every day, Zara watched David with Amina in his arms, and she couldn't help but feel the depth of his love for them both. Her body had changed. Their life had changed. But what hadn't changed was the love they had for each other. Zara smiled as she watched David hold Amina, gently rocking her to sleep in the nursery. She looks just like you, Zara said, her voice full of wonder. David smiled, kissing Amina's forehead before looking at Zara. I'm just glad she's got your eyes. Zara laughed softly. It's a good mix, don't you think? David nodded. The best of both worlds. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Zara looked at David with a softness in her eyes that she hadn't known she could feel. David, I just want you to know. I never thought I'd find something like this. A love like this. I thought I was too strong to need it, too independent to want it. David took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. You're strong because you allowed me in. Because you trusted me. And now, we have this family. Zara smiled, her heart full. We do, don't we? David leaned forward and kissed her forehead. And I'll love you both forever. Through everything. No matter what happens, this is where I'm meant to be. Zara felt tears sting her eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of fear or uncertainty. They were tears of gratitude, for love, for this life, and for the family they had built together. A year later, as Zara held Amina in her arms, watching David play with her in the yard, she realized something. She wasn't just happy. She was fulfilled. The fear she once had about losing herself, about losing control, it had faded, replaced by something far more beautiful, trust. Trust in David, in herself, and in the future they were building together. This was home. And no matter what the world had thrown at them, Zara knew that this was where she was meant to be. With David. With Amina. Together. Thanks for watching till the next story. Thank you.